So, welcome everybody. Thank you again so much for coming here and spending the next hour with us to hear us talk about the School of Fashion at UCA Epsom. We have a roster of some great graduates, each one representing a different course that the college looks after here. So I'm going to let them each introduce themselves and tell you a little bit about what they do and the course that they graduated from. Starting with you, Natasha.
Hi everyone, I'm Natasha Booth. I work at Fashion East now. I graduated from the Fashion Promotion and Imaging course here in 2012, so 5 years ago. And Fashion East is a non-profit fashion organisation. We support young designers with showcasing, business support, mentoring, kind of everything that they need to start a business, and we showcase them at Fashion Week. And I sort of run all of the elements of that. Cool. Next.
Hi everyone, I'm Matt. I'm the style editor for Men's Health magazine. I graduated from Epsom in 2008 and I did fashion journalism. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Kevin. I graduated last year from fashion management and marketing, and I currently work at Future Laboratory, which is a trend forecasting brand consultancy. So we help brands by forecasting trends and creating strategies for them.
Hello, I'm Jenny Houghton. I graduated from the fashion degree course quite some time ago, and I'm now, having worked in the PR and marketing industries for the last 18 years, I'm now back teaching the MA courses here at UCA.
So you've come full circle.
Yes, very much.
I guess I wanted to start by talking to you all a bit about how it feels being back here. For some of you, this building wasn't here. For some of you, you've seen it, but obviously with a different purpose, with different technical issues in them. So Jenny, let's start with you, because how has the campus changed in the time since you were a student here?
Yes, the building we are currently in definitely wasn't here when I was here. So the college itself feels about twice as big as when I was a student. It's very familiar being back. It feels as lovely as it did when I was here, and that was a resounding thing of why I chose Epsom as well, because as a university it did feel very accommodating and welcoming, and it's exactly the same being back. So yeah, it's lovely.
Do you remember your first day?
Yes. I remember my interview, I remember the open day, I remember my first day and being very excited that the people I'd met had also got onto the course. So, and someone who I thought perhaps might not be great actually turned out to be one of my very best friends. So was quite an amusing first day.
What advice would you give anyone kind of looking at universities when they get there for the when they first set foot on campus? What do you think is important to look for?
Having started the course, or when they're still looking?
When they're still looking.
I think massively, there's so much competition out there, but I think one thing Epsom has, it has a lovely feeling to it. I think you will have a gut instinct about what is right for you, what size of campus you want, what the lifestyle's like, what the other students are like, how are people when you talk to them, ask questions, see how people respond and get a feel for things. And I think you'll see how the space works for you. That would be my advice. I looked at quite a few when I was looking around, and this by far felt the best kind of environment for me.
Okay. And Kevin, having graduated quite recently, last year, so it's almost 12 months probably to the day that you handed in your project. How does it feel being back here, but as someone who now is on the kind of beginning path of their career?
To be fair, it feels like I've never left. Like, tutors are always great help. They always, because the relationship you have with tutors and course leaders isn't on such it's quite on a personal level, and they nature you through the course. I mean, it's always good to come back and catch up with them. I mean, I've come back 3 times since I've graduated, so it's quite a homely feel to it as well whenever I'm here, so it's quite nice.
And what was your first day like?
My first day, didn't know what to expect, because I was waiting for quite a few different options before I came to Epsom, so I actually applied through clearing. But it was an amazing experience. Met, like Jenny said, amazing friends. Some of them are my best friends now. Met my girlfriend here. So yeah, it's really good.
And Matt, what about you? How do you feel being back? So you finished in 2008.
Yes, I've actually been back quite a lot. I taught a couple of modules on the course here. I did some marking. You can't get rid of me, basically. I just keep coming back. Yeah, I like it. I always feel kind of comfortable and a bit sort of nostalgic walking through the doors. I didn't actually live in Epsom. I'm from not far from here, so I actually stayed at home whilst I was at university. So the big thing for me is like, it's a bit of a pain in the ass getting here. So I just remember that. But obviously once I was here, it was like, right, I'm here now. It's nice. It's good. So yeah, I have kind of fond memories that, like you guys were saying, the tutors are like, I would consider them friends now, which I know sounds really sad. But I've just sort of ended up working kind of alongside them in the industry, and we'll kind of occasionally speak to them and ask them for advice and things like that. And I think it's really nice, it's useful, and just their experience and what they can share, if you sort of learn how to sort of tap into it and ask them, is invaluable. I think it was great.
Because I guess one of those things that we tend not to realise when you're in the middle of it is how much of a community you're building around yourself, but also how much you're involved in a community. And Natasha, earlier we were talking about how you bump into people now in your current role that have had some experience with either being a student from here or coming in here to teach. Or can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, so I was saying to Dal before that in the industry that I'm in now, you obviously you have contact with a lot of different people, and it's not often that you actually talk about where you studied, with somebody new, but if eventually that comes up in conversation, I've run into quite a lot of people who actually studied here that I just had no idea that they would have been here, and we were around at kind of similar times. They're all doing really interesting things, from stylists. Lola Chatterton was here, Laura McCluskey, who's a photographer, Ruth Asai, who's a photographer. She was on my course, and she's just on a project for Kenzo that just came out a couple of weeks ago. But yeah, it's great. It's great running into people, and everyone's got really great things to say about the university, sort of like across the industry, even if they haven't studied here.
And what was your first day like?
I really can't remember that well, which is really bad. But just when you were all talking about yours, I was kind of trying to think back to mine, and maybe it's a little bit of a blur with the opening day and also with the interview process. But I was lucky because when I came here, I knew somebody back from my art foundation course in Brighton, so she was coming as well. So maybe wasn't as quite worried. If you were coming here by yourself, you might be a bit more like, right, come on, I've got to meet loads of people. So I had maybe that safety net a little bit, but I can't really remember, which is terrible because it was not even that long ago. Sorry.
And how does it feel studying a subject that's as dynamic and as alive and as ever-changing as fashion in a town like Epsom? Because I think that's one of the things that people kind of, when people meet graduates from our courses, is that they kind of can't believe that they're so great and they're so innovative and just really smart at what they do, and then they've been nurtured in this very sleepy kind of quite small town environment, which is one of the reasons why lots of people like coming here, but it equally is another reason why people think twice about maybe spending 3 years with us. How did you feel about talking about fashion, talking about some of the work that you're actually doing now, but in this kind of environment?
I have to say that was maybe one of the more challenging things for me from studying from here. So I kind of was really keen to put myself in the industry and gain as much experience as I could, within the fashion industry, because this felt even though we were talking about really great innovative things, we had brilliant lecturers come in to speak to us, it did feel quite removed from that industry. So I tried, to gain as much experience as I could with interning and, meeting people and just going and being in that environment in London. So I think there's ways you can study here, but it's not far to go into London and make sure you're in that scene if that's what you want to do. Which was something that I feel like I did from early on, and I feel like that paid off for me. But that's not, I've got friends who didn't do it that way, and it worked for them too.
And Matt, so you lived at home whilst you were a student. How was that?
I did, yeah. It was cheap, and it was fine. I was a bit sort of removed from London, and I didn't really start going into London until I was about 21, 22, so I was quite late to it. But I think there's definitely a kind of misconception that if you aren't studying in London, you're not necessarily right in the heart of it. And I suppose there is that to some extent, but actually it's just what you make of it. As soon as I started doing internships, I was in London all the time. And actually being here didn't sort of hinder me in any way. I was still learning. I still had exposure to everything that I needed to, and then you just kind of hop on a train and you're in the centre of it. I didn't really feel particularly removed, I suppose.
Where did you intern?
My first internship, my first and last internship actually, was at a magazine called Arena. So it's a bit like GQ or Esquire. It actually folded I've taken a lot of magazines down with me. We'll talk about that in a minute. But yeah, I as in the second year, you have to do a 4-week work experience placement. I don't know if that's still the same. And I left it quite late, and I wrote to the editorial assistant at Arena magazine and just said, can I come in? And luckily it sort of worked out right, but they only had a 2-week placement. And then I was going to have to go to a PR agency after that, and I just didn't really fancy PR. Luckily, Arena have got a lovely fashion director who took a shine to me. Anyway, I just sort of went and butted him up, and he took me on for another 6 months. I ended up going to Paris with him and assisting on shows and things like that. So it was amazing. Yeah, go and intern. It's really important.
Yeah, and that's not necessarily something you need to do whilst you can start that now. That process is never too early to kind of begin making those contacts. Because again, we talk a lot, the word contact might sound incredibly, what do I mean, sort of like The Apprentice or something like that. But what we really mean is that the fashion industry is incredibly small, and it is a really, really small community. It may seem quite big, and it may seem quite overwhelming in the kind of social media world that we're in, but actually the amount of people that do good work and good quality work and keep working, it's very, very small, and we're happy that a lot of our graduates, alumni are part of that, but also that doesn't mean to say that you can't start getting into that world already and coming here or you're starting your degree with a little black book of some of those contacts is going to kind of keep you and get you started at a really great level. Now, Jenny, you worked in PR even though you studied fashion design.
I did.
Can you tell us about how you switched and why you didn't focus on? So when you graduated from the design course, how were you?
Prior to that, actually, so in the second year, we were encouraged to get work placements, and I struck gold by getting a work placement at Alexander McQueen, which at the time my tutor was, somebody's put McQueen down on here, and it was like, yeah, no, it's true. So I started working with the PR team there. So on the Joan of Arc Spring Summer '98 show, I was like, what decade am I talking? And there was just no going back from that. So actually seeing, do you know what, having communication and working out how you can promote a designer of that caliber when you certainly, I was never going to compete with him, it just changed everything. And I realised, actually, I'm a really bad designer, but I'm quite good at talking about other people and promoting them. So from then, I got to work with them for 3 seasons. And then as I graduated, I was able to adapt what I was doing on the course with that in mind, which was invaluable. And then I got a job when I graduated through recommendation. Because of the work I'd done with McQueen, I got a job at Ghost and was there for 6 years until I became their head of PR. So yeah, it just was the career for me, and thank goodness I'd done the experience. It was. And
what are your thoughts on that sense of community and those contacts and having that black book? Because of course within PR that's something that's invaluable.
Absolutely.
It's an invaluable tool.
Oh, it's totally invaluable, and that's the thing. You never know who is interning for you tomorrow is suddenly going to be the next editor or designer or CEO of any company, and people are brilliant. You know, there are so many brilliant people in this industry, and I've got friends that I've made from 20 years ago who are doing amazing work now. So I think, yeah, just befriend everybody that you can and be a decent person, because you don't need to be superficial, because people will remember that and remember you. So yeah, make it a positive memory.
And on that note, Kevin, did you have preconceptions about what the fashion industry was like or what people would be like? Because we've all watched, most of us have watched things like The Hills and Devil Wears Prada and things like that. And I guess the message that fashion often sends out about itself is that we are a very, very certain way. Yeah. Did you find that to be true, or how did you feel about kind of going into this industry?
I think for me it was quite different, because when I started interning, all the internships at the beginning of the course here was quite streetwear focused, so everyone that I bumped into and networked with were really chilled and relaxed. So I never got that kind of, I never perceived it in that way. So it was really just chilled, and I had a great time interning for the brands that I did at the time. So really cool.
And what about the rest of you? Did any of you, because again, another thing that we hear is this kind of fear almost of what the industry is like. Is it full of horrible people? Is it full of tricky people? And the world is full of those people. Fashion isn't just exclusively a place for those sorts of characters. But I guess they tend to get a lot of the spotlight about this industry. Now, there are lots and lots of incredibly hardworking people you're sat kind of next to them now, that kind of continue to work at really high level, but you are also nice, and kind of. How did you feel about, Natasha, what about, especially at your level where you're working with these cool young designers that everyone wants to kind of shoot or photograph or become friends with, or how well prepared were you to deal with those characters?
I think I'm in quite a unique organisation because we're non-profit. So everything we're doing to help these designers, it's really because we care about them, and it's a philanthropic project. So, we're not rinsing them for content. We're not doing this. We're not making money from them. We're not doing those things, and a lot of other people are. So it's a really genuine relationship we have with them, and a lot of them have become our really good friends because we work so closely with them, and a lot of them are kind of similar age to myself. And, we go above and beyond, and I'll, spend weekends working with them. We've shared beds in Paris when we can't afford hotel rooms, that sort of thing. But I mean, what you were saying before, I've never come into anyone who's not been very nice. I'm really lucky that everyone I've worked with has been very nice. But you do sort of hear stories and sort of like fables about these certain characters, but you never really know if it's true. But I've only ever experienced really kind people and people who are willing to help you if you're nice to them, and I do the same now with interns who work with me, because that's how I started at Fashion East. I was an intern then when I was studying here. And I remember who I was working for then at Fashion East, she was so kind to me and so encouraging, and that boosted my confidence a lot. And so I try to do that now with the interns that we have. And if they want to work anywhere in particular, I will make that call, and I'll try and put in a good word for them. And I think, what goes around comes around.
Yeah. And in terms of how the industry has changed, I guess, particularly within the magazine world, Matt, since you were studying magazines and journalism to now working in it, what has changed, and how well prepared have you been for that change?
There's a lot less of them in general, especially in the men's sector. I just think people have stopped. Well, I know that people have stopped buying magazines like they used to. And there seems to be a shift from the general to the specific. So if you look at magazines that have gone under, like Arena, for instance, or FHM, FHM is something slightly different, but they were both quite broad general interest magazines. The ones that are still thriving, things like T3 or Men's Health, are quite specific. They're about technology or about health. And so the internet obviously happened, and people could get all of their general interest from the internet. And then so why would you kind of go to somewhere like Arena or Esquire or GQ, or with no disrespect to those magazines, I like them very much, but why would you go there when you can get all of this other stuff for free? So that's the first thing, and I think the second thing is that we've all had to adapt to working online, and that's not just as simple as kind of learning how to use a CMS or saying, yes, I can type and post something online. It's an entirely different environment. And I think a lot of traditional print journalists are very precious about things like readership figures and engagement and stuff like this. So traditionally you'd write something in a magazine, you'd give it to your section editor, then it would go to the sub-editor, it would be read by the editor, it would be sort of tweaked up and it would be published, and you'd think, great, someone's going to read that. But actually that might be a kind of a little nib in a magazine with hundreds of thousands of words in it. Like, how do you know that anybody's reading that? Or how do you really know if people like what you're kind of doing? And it used to be that you could tell that by the sales of a magazine. Obviously, things like FHM, for instance, I think once sold like 1 million copies in a month, and that is an insane amount. So you know that you're doing something right, hopefully over and above putting a naked lady on the front cover. But anyway, so now I think the thing is that everything is so heavily analysed that you really know who's reading what and whether it's successful or not. So you have to get used to knowing if your work is rubbish, or if you've kind of not done such a good job at that point, and you need to kind of learn to tweak and make it better. But I think really it's extremely liberating. Like, why would you not want to know that? And so you can just learn to make it better.
And were you like that as a student, kind of willing to accept the feedback and knowing and taking on that criticism as and when it
I figured out pretty early that you can't really be a journalist if you're not willing to have your work critiqued. And so, yeah, it's a bit like, I don't know, it's a bit like standing in front of the room with no clothes on. You just have to do it and get over it, and then you get used to it eventually. I imagine. I don't really. Maybe that's not the best analogy, but yeah, so I learned a little bit of that at uni. I got used to kind of having my work handed around or kind of critiqued by people who clearly knew much more than I did or had more experience. But that's only a good thing, and that will only continue. I think one of the best and most rewarding things about going to work at magazines is that suddenly you're nowhere near the best writer in that magazine, and there are people that have been doing it for 20, 30 years who are just brilliant, and you really have to up your game. But if you listen, you'll learn, and you really become better. Just as a point, the first thing I ever wrote for FHM, I handed in, and the guy literally just tore it up in front of me, drops it on the floor. So that was a pretty...
What was it about? Do you know why did he tear it out? Was it not very good? Or?
Yeah, I should imagine. I think it was an interview. It was an interview with Riz Ahmed, actually. He didn't like it.
Wow.
It was just, I think the structure was wrong. I don't know, but yeah.
And the rest of you, how did you all feel about that feedback? Because this is something that, again, it's very rare that in a magazine, I think you get feedback quite in a company of that, that's arranged like that. It kind of mirrors, I guess, quite a lot of what you get on a degree or within education. But in some roles, you are just sort of left to learn for yourself, because particularly you started as an intern at Fashion East, and sort of it feels like, I don't know, you can correct me, but the job that you now do, you've sort of created it yourself and the way you do it. So really you're kind of almost irreplaceable as that person. How do you feel about, do you get regular feedback? Is that something you want?
No, it is a strange setup, and it's a very small organisation. It's my boss, Lulu Kennedy, MBE. She founded the organisation in 2000, and it's always been very small, and it's her, myself, and we have a paid assistant, and we have quite a long-term intern. So it's very small, but Lulu would be the first person to tell you that I'm in charge of her, and she kind of doesn't tell me, right, this is what we're doing now, this is the project we're working on. It's me saying, right, this is what we're doing now, you need to do this by this day. It's kind of called up management, apparently, but I wouldn't say I had any management skills. I've never been taught that. We don't do sort of like annual reviews or anything like that. It's very much, I mean, she sort of fell into that role by accident. She didn't really have fashion experience herself. She organised raves in Naples and did parties in London in the 90s. So we're sort of all learning on the job as we go. But she has definitely taught me, not in a way of like, this is how you do this. I've definitely learned from just watching her and, in meetings, and how we deal with sponsors and funding, and how you sort of navigate the kind of trickier side of fashion, and maybe people who you might not be getting on so well with, but you need to, change their mind about something. So I've definitely learned from her. But yeah, I've kind of put myself in this position, which is amazing, to be a sort of an irreplaceable part of an organisation. But, we always joke, if I got hit by a bus and I would know what was happening the next day. So she was like, we've got a new assistant. She was like, start telling Raf exactly what you do every day, just in case something happens. Like, okay.
Yeah, be careful with what they put in your tea.
Yeah.
And Jenny, what about you? This kind of constant loop of feedback that I guess we all live in this, because we all live in this constant feedback. Every time you buy something online, you're asked to review it. Every time you take a cab, if you use Uber, you're asked to review it. Every time you go on holiday, every time you go to a restaurant, every time you potentially have sat in a lecture, there's this constant loop of feedback, and this is happening in all aspects of our lives. How did it feel getting the feedback as a student and then as a professional?
I think when I was a student, I was sometimes quite amazed how many modules I did manage to pass when I think back to some of the creations I did make with sort of jackets with sleeves hanging off at Brad's shoulders. And they always find a very constructive way to criticise my designs, bless them. So I kind of think, very fair when I was at college. And I like to think that I am utilising some of that with the way I'm teaching now. Industry, well, it depends who. I mean, you kind of have clients who can, they're judging you on everything from how much coverage you've got, how creative your strategies are, what's the PR campaign idea, do they like it, are you spending too much money? There's so many elements within work of what is what is successful. And now, like we say, 360, it's now back to the students, so they can actually have an opinion and feedback their online surveys. So it's everything is accountable, and and like you say, it's good to have that. So you can only improve when you get feedback.
And Kevin, the kind of job that you're doing at the moment, is it a graduate training scheme?
Yeah,
is that
so
right?
it's a grad scheme at the moment. So I'm currently doing a cycle of 4 different departments for design, marketing, strategy, and LSN Global, so the trend forecasting part of it. And throughout the whole scheme, you do receive feedback and criticism on how well you're doing, or because you're constantly bouncing ideas off each other. But I think coming to Epsom and like having tutors that support you and give you feedback and criticism on a daily basis, like Catherine and Mary, without doubt would tell me if I was doing something wrong or if my project was shit last year. But like having that really helped me prepare myself for the real world and to take criticism on board when working. So
yeah. And we talk a lot about the real world, which is an interesting kind of term, as if we're in some sort of bubble. But I guess the fashion industry does exist in a tiny bubble. What is the real world like when, like, kind of 1 year after graduating? Is it what you thought it would be?
Because I was interning every summer while I was at uni, I kind of expect what I'm doing right now is it's what I was expecting. So I'm not too shocked about how the real world is. But I mean, it's just getting yourself in a routine and knowing the fact that you're not going to have 6 weeks off in the summer and only having 20 days holiday for the year. But I mean, it's as long as you're interning constantly, it leads you up to the real world anyway. It's not going to be a massive shock unless you've just been at uni and haven't done anything with yourself. So.
And did any of you have to manage kind of jobs whilst you were students? How was that kind of managing the two? Because again, that's a kind of very pertinent question, particularly right now with the costs kind of gone up a lot, or keep going up. How did you manage that, Matt?
I had 3 jobs. I was working at FHM after I graduated, but that was only as a kind of permanent freelancer. So it was like an intern, but I was getting paid because I would write articles here and there. I didn't have like a proper salary or a wage. Then I had a bar job just around the corner from the place where I worked, which I would work at during the week, and then on a Saturday night I did a cash in hand job behind another bar at a nightclub. So I was pretty tired all the time, but also it was amazing. Like you had to be careful with money, and actually I was super lucky that my parents lived relatively close to London, so I could kind of travel in and back, and I didn't have to try and find somewhere to live in London until I think I moved out when I was I moved out officially when I was about 24, so I was quite late leaving home, but that was really, really helpful because I don't think I could have, maybe I could have done that, but it was much easier not having to do that. So you have to be careful with money, and yeah, I just think the thing is, it does sound like a lot of hard work, but actually I was having the time of my life. It was great. So I think as long as you're doing something that you love and you know that you're working towards something, then sometimes it doesn't matter if you're working, I don't know, 18, 24-hour day. I don't know. Just a long time, basically.
I guess, did you all feel prepared for the real world? That should have been my question. Maybe that's kind of a cleaner question. Did you feel ready after your degree?
Yeah, I think I felt ready at the time. I don't know whether I was ready. I think there's definitely a step up in quality and what's expected of you, and that's not to the detriment of the degree course. I just think you have more time to write stuff, for instance, and you have tutors that are here to improve your work and make your work the best that it can be for you. It's a personal thing because, they're here to kind of get the best out of you. In my experience at a magazine, you have very little time to write anything, and your editor is looking for the best for their magazine, and they're time pressured. So if you're not writing your best stuff, it's not for them to fix for your sake, it's for them to fix for the magazine's sake. So you just need to be like on it, otherwise they'll just take it off you and write something else, which is a bit demoralizing. But then you learn, you get better. That's how it is, I suppose.
And what was it like, your kind of peer group, the other students you were with? How closely have you kept in touch with people you studied with?
My boss studied here. my immediate boss, the style director of Men's Health, studied here, so I'm in touch with him quite a lot.
What course did you do?
He did fashion journalism. We actually did the most horrendous photo shoot together when we were here, which, if it ever saw the light of day, would ruin us both. So yeah, I keep in touch that way. I don't know about anyone else.
Yeah, I mean, I just graduated last year, so I'm in close contact with most people in my course, and because by third year the people do drop out and the course does get a bit smaller, with a lot of us are quite close friends and we do go out regularly and whatnot. So yeah.
Natasha?
Yeah, mine's a bit of a mix really, because like I said, I had a friend from Brighton who came and studied here at the same time, so we're still close. But I think with the fashion promotion and imaging course, because it's so varied, people went into so many different industries, and actually I'm still in touch with quite a few of them, and some of them are really good friends, but we're all doing really different things. So the same before, one works in Chanel in a kind of officey type job, one actually works in sort of a techie marketing type thing, and someone's travelling but was working in journalism before, others are photographers and stylists. So it's nice that there is that variety and you do keep in touch with people, and actually, like you said before, it's really handy to have contacts, obviously people that you're friends with too, but that's something that the university and that course in particular does. It really sets you up, and you sort of go into industry knowing that you've sort of got those peers around you to kind of
Have you
help
collaborated with any of them?
I'm just trying to think if I have. I mean, not really, not with any designers specifically. Maybe with stylists and photographers on kind of very small projects. But I've always been in touch with Joe as well about internships and that sort of thing, and if any of the students were looking for experience, and if we had an opening, that sort of thing.
Jenny?
I am still very, very much in touch. One of my closest friends is the girl who I shared a house with literally just across the park. So kind of were glued to each other 20 years ago and still are now. So I think it's really important, the people that you kind of grow up with and develop. And she became a designer and she has her own business, and I went the other way, but actually it's great because still we kind of feed back on each other. And she's also come back to UCA at different times and has done kind of lectures and modules and teaching here. So I think it's been great.
And how did you negotiate the switch from the design to the PR? Like, as a student, how did everyone take it? Was it kind of quite a strange thing to do back then, or quite common?
I think they probably saw it coming. I think, realising actually when I fed back, so all the work I did from the work experience, actually realising I still had to complete my degree, and it was still a design degree, so I didn't switch in terms of all my content. However, I looked at it from a very different light, and I did a lot of research about all my projects. Became about McQueen and about the industry and journalists that I'd met and how I could feed that back into my projects. So it kind of made sense because I just sort of used the degree, which is obviously fundamental to having that qualification. However, it didn't matter whether it was in fashion promotion or fashion design or fashion journalism. The job I then got was based as well on the experience that I'd got. So.
And now you're teaching here.
Yes.
Is there anything you can see in the students that you kind of recognise, or what has changed for students in the short time?
Short time, you're so kind. Well, everything has changed in a way in terms of communication. I'm working with students now on projects that are brilliant and exciting, and digital marketing that wasn't even, the internet wasn't around when I was here, and projects and the way people communicate has totally changed, and I think there is sometimes a part of going back to actually communication. What is that? What does that mean? Because when I was doing PR, it was faxing press releases about shows and picking up the phone, and I think sometimes there is a danger that people become nameless and faceless and think, well, I can ping an email to that person, or I can LinkedIn request them, and I've never met them, and you feel you know people now because everyone can see everything. But actual fundamental relationships where you walk in a room and a journalist recognises you because they've worked with you for so many years is still important, which is what I'm also talking to students about, is understanding relationships and quality of work, and not just one area. It's not just social media, it's about everything that encompasses a brand and how you get that out.
How do you be a good student?
Don't ask me.
What do you think are those, this is to all of you as well, looking back over your educational career and your career with us, what do you think, and I guess a lot of you employ or work with interns who I assume are students also, so what are you looking for when you're seeing them, and do you recognise any of yourself in the people you take?
Yeah, I think, advice I would give to students is just to get as much experience as you can, but also not to put too much pressure on yourself and to enjoy yourself whilst you are at university. And you have got the freedom to do this, to do whatever you want to do, and also, to try all these different things out. That's kind of something, because I'm really lucky that I got a job with one of the only places I interned. I kind of wish that I'd tried a million things before I had that pressure of, like monthly rent. Obviously I was paying that, but I had a student loan, so even crazy things that I didn't think I was interested in, set design, whatever, like a week's placement somewhere. I would really encourage people to do kind of a bit of everything. And interns that we see, I mean, for us, it's really about the right attitude and someone who's really willing to get involved and also just happy to be there and kind of willing to get there, just to get as involved as they need to be, and not to really have huge expectations or, that's something we were talking about a little bit before. They kind of, a lot of them don't want desk jobs or they don't want this, and they come in, they're like, I don't want to do this, I don't want to do that. And it's like, oh, that is what real life is. It is a desk job, even if it does seem glamorous and fashion week and fashion events. There's everything else throughout the year, which is sitting in a desk. But yeah, we see some really great intern applicants, but those are the ones that I go above and beyond to sort of help, are the ones who are really willing to get help with whatever they need to.
Okay. And Matt, for the interns?
You'd be surprised how many interns turn up and are just rubbish. And I don't mean they don't have the ability to do it. They're just bored. They don't want to be there. And I just think, why have you gone through the process of getting here? You're wasting your own time and my time. I mean, so that's the only thing I would say. Just think about what you really want to do, and kind of go for it, and make sure that you do sort of go for that area. You're absolutely right. I think you should try. Well, no, but I think you should definitely kind of look and try a few things and see what interests you. But once you find it, or you find yourself in a good spot, even if it does mean that you're going to be sat in a cupboard, for instance, doing returns for 6 weeks, which I know sounds deathly, but hopefully you'll find a nice fashion editor that will take pity on you or something, I don't know, but just work really hard. That's it, because I know plenty of people that are not the best writers in the world, they're not the best stylists, and they've done really, really well because they really wanted it and they just worked really, really hard. So that enthusiasm can't be faked. I think you just need to kind of really go for it. From a sort of student point of view, I would say just make the most of it whilst you're here. Get as much out of the tutors as you can. Practice, experiment, do all the stuff that you probably won't have time to be able to do when you're trying to earn a living and pay your rent. And turn up. I didn't always turn up. You should definitely turn up.
I guess, but also just in closing, what myths about the fashion industry do you now want to dispel for everyone listening? What are those things that we, again, those stereotypes or things that people assume the fashion industry is like this? What could you put to rest?
That it's glamorous. Okay.
Superficial. Yeah. I think actually, like you mentioned earlier, there are a hell of a lot of hardworking, really decent, lovely people. And it's one thing I was fundamentally sure I was not going to be a PR that was superficial and dreadful and just made fake relationships. Actually be genuine and be hardworking, because like you say, it's not all frilly, it's really hard work out there. So yeah.
Okay. Natasha?
I agree. I was going to say it's not very glamorous at all. There are elements, it is a lucrative industry and there are definitely people who are making great money, but there's not that many people really who are making great money. And I think, we sort of get people come to our office and they're like, oh, is this it? And we're like, oh, yeah, this is it. And it's actually really nice. So I would say, that, and just, everyone is really nice. And everyone's really encouraging, and actually it's not, even though it feels competitive, it's not. The only people I've sort of come across, they've only ever encouraged and sort of helped other people and elevated other people, so it's not cutthroat.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much for coming back to Epsom and sharing your story. And a round of applause for everyone, please.